Welcome in, Slumpbusters. It is your host, Juju Talk Sports, and of course by Kyle Ledbetter. And it is time for another NBA breakdown. And this one, we're staying in Texas. We are sticking with the San Antonio Spurs. And our guest today, Carolina Teague. I'm going to let her drop all the shameless plugs as she can say it a little bit better than I can here, folks. So Carolina, where can we find all your content?
Thank you so much. You can find me on San Antonio SportsStar, ESPN 1250 AM, 103.3 FM. And I also am a writer for poundingtherock.com. I'm a contributor. I also write for Sports as Told by a Girl. And I am a ring announcer for River City Wrestling, certified mic slayer. That's me at Carolina Teague _. You already know what time it is, baby. Thanks for having me on.
That definitely says everything that you know how to rock a mic. If you could be a ring announcer, what is your best? Let's get ready to rumble.
Oh, okay. I can't do it because I
gotta be quiet.
Oh yeah, I gotta be quiet. Okay, all right. You gotta cue me in. Like just say 1, 2, 3 or something like that.
All right, let's go. 1, 2, 3.
Let's get ready to rumble. That wasn't that good.
Well, hey, Carolina, I'm glad that we were able to get this interview going here today. I wish we could have got it after Greg Popovich would have set the all-time record, but it will happen. It will happen sometime this week. Is there any game you're targeting on the schedule in particular for it to happen?
Yes, I am targeting it for it to be tomorrow's game, the Utah Jazz. And the reason why is because selfish reasons only, I'm going to the game. So I want to be there when it happens. So I didn't go to yesterday's game, to the Toronto game. So I was like, I kind of hope they lose that game because I'm not going to be there. So I was like, Friday for sure, Utah Jazz. And plus earlier this season, the Spurs had that nail biter win against the Jazz. And that was a really great game because the Jazz were one of the best teams in the West at the time. And they're still one of the best teams in the West, but it was a nail biter. And at the time, the Spurs were always losing to trash teams, but winning against great teams. And that game was one of my favorite games. Plus, one of the things that I really like is Jordan Clarkson as well. He's one of my favorite players and he's from San Antonio too. He went to Wagner High School and that's kind of where I'm from, that area too, the hood part of San Antonio. So I'm excited to kind of see how that all goes down.
Well, they did at least beat one trash team the other night. They beat the Los Angeles Lakers. So Greg Popovich could, of course, at least tie the record. And hey, doing it against his biggest rival in the Western Conference is definitely a good way to do it. When we look at the totality of Greg Popovich's career, obviously 1,336 career wins, multiple NBA championships. He's a gold medalist. When you think about the all-time greats, when you think about the all-time list, where does Greg Popovich rank and how does his coaching style kind of differ from some of the other guys on that list? Like when you think of Phil Jackson, you think of Pat Riley.
So for me, I grew up a Bulls fan, a 90s Bulls fan. That's what got me into sports to begin with. So I was a huge Chicago Bulls fan, loved everything about the 90s, loved everything about Michael Jordan. I grew up in the South Side of Chicago. So growing up, I still am a huge fan of Phil Jackson. I love Phil Jackson. He's taken the Bulls all the way to the top. He's taken the Lakers all the way to the top. But I have to give the edge to Greg Popovich. And I think Greg Popovich is the greatest coach of all time. And that's subjective to everybody's opinion. But the reason why I give Greg Popovich the edge is because he did not have the assets that the Chicago Bulls had. You had Michael Jordan, you had Scottie Pippen, then you had Shaq, then you have Kobe. These are arguably some of the greatest players of all time. Greg Popovich had to build his assets through the draft or build his assets a different way. They sent everybody through the G League, through their system. They had a system to train all their players, to build them up, and they created a team that was built, not bought. And he's been able to sustain his longevity with one team throughout several decades. So if I had to give the edge up of greatest coach of all time, even though I am a Bulls lover and I am a Phil Jackson super fan, I do give the edge to Greg Popovich for that reason. Their coaching styles are different because, like I said, the way that Coach Popovich, he coaches through the G League, then he brings them up and then he'll put them back in the G League and bring them out. And I be telling people on air all the time that this is like Diddy making the band. Like he shuts the studio down every time you think you're about to hit the court and be on the main stage, then he'll send you back to the G League and back and forth. With Phil Jackson, his style was totally different. He was more zen and he didn't care about the troublemakers as long as they performed well on court. So there's a ton of differences and with every single coaching style, especially with the triangle offense with Phil Jackson and then with the beautiful beautiful passing game that Greg Popovich created. There's so many differences, but definitely give the edge to Greg Popovich. So shout out to him. Congratulations to him. He's one game away from beating Don Nelson's record. So I'm really proud of him.
So you've been watching the team for the last 4 years. It's been a super interesting run from me watching it from an outsider perspective, because I'm from San Diego. Kawhi Leonard's my guy. And I kind of look at the situation like the Spurs, the game kind of passed them by a bit and they alienated Kawhi Leonard, and, you know, DeMar DeRozan's playing better now. And I've been fascinated by that. So I ask you, like, how has the rebuild gone over the last 4 years for the Spurs? Because while it's not the level of success they're used to, I also feel like they've overachieved given the level of talent that they've had on the team.
I think they're criticized really hard when it comes to this rebuild. Every team goes through a rebuild phase, and some teams never recover from rebuild phases. And if the Bulls are great, I keep bringing up the damn Bulls, but I swear I watch other teams. But the perfect example I could say is the Spurs have been in the playoffs for 22, 23 years. I always forget which one it is, but they've been in the playoffs for so long that I feel like this is a beautiful era for the San Antonio Spurs. And Greg Popovich has mentioned multiple times that this is one of his favorite eras because they are a younger team and he's trying to build them into the players that they are. DeMar DeRozan, even though he left San Antonio, went to Chicago, he even said Coach Pop made him a better player. So the beauty of this whole scenario is that he takes these opportunities in the game to put these players in clutch moments that they aren't used to. And they're not necessarily winning in these clutch moments. They have fourth quarter issues all season long, but they are taking those opportunities to learn and to grow and figure out those mental mistakes, especially like with free throws, turnovers, you know, getting out of bounds, these little small errors that create losses. They're able to grow in that aspect. So I think the rebuild phases is just incredible time. I think it's an incredible time. Other people disagree with me all day long.
Carolina, my question. So you mentioned the fourth quarter issues. The Spurs are unfortunately 0-32 when trailing heading into the fourth quarter. So it's obviously a really bad stat. It's not very characteristic of this Spurs organization. Obviously, we know how resilient they are. That's how Pop has always raised them to be or coached them up to be. So what is the biggest thing that's separating them and why they're struggling in that spot? Why they're not able to pull off those fourth quarter comebacks?
I think they're just shooting the ball a little bit too quickly and they're making small mental mistakes in these moments. I feel like their transition offense hasn't been the best. And I think they're creating small issues like turnovers in the last couple of minutes. They aren't being able to make free throws at critical moments. These little small things add up and they're not able to take it all the way. And that's the main issue, what I think with the fourth quarter is. Also, that is a weird stat too. And I'm not a weird stat. That's a stat that is a crazy stat and it shouldn't be overlooked. I've been going to the games all season long, and every time they're down in the third quarter, I'm like, they're gonna lose the game. But I didn't think it was that bad. I didn't think it was I think it's 0-34 now. I didn't think it was that bad. So it is that bad, but you know, it is what it is. I don't understand it, but all I know is I tell myself all the time, this is a rebuild phase. This is a rebuild phase. This is a rebuild phase, and it calms me down from getting angry.
So you mentioned the rebuild phase part of the team. And so let's talk about those guys. Because obviously Dejounte Murray, we know he's awesome. He's had a breakout type of season this year. Other than him, obviously they've had Derek White be a great performer. Now, obviously he's out the door. I'm a big fan of Lonnie Walker, and I think that he's got some potential there. They're still got Jakob Poeltl as a piece from the original Kawhi Leonard trade, who's giving them numbers. You know, they're still holding out hope for a couple of those draft picks over the last couple of years. So who are the other pieces that people should know about for the San Antonio Spurs other than, say, Dejounte Murray, who was obviously in the All-Star game this year?
So I think the main contributors, my personal favorites, I think Jakob Poeltl, you just mentioned him. He's one of my favorite ones. And we're talking about development and rebuilding. When Jakob Poeltl first came to Toronto, he was averaging about 6 points. Now he's averaging double-digit figures every single game, and he seems to be a threat. He seems to be able to create from a defensive aspect and an offensive perspective as well. So he seems like a more complete player now that he's been playing for a while with the Spurs. The other person that I want to give credit to, of course, is Lonnie Walker. Recently, like you said, for the most part in the season, he's been pretty inconsistent, but ever since the Derek White trade, he's been very consistent, minus that first game and the most recent game where he had his back injury. He had soreness in his back, or he had that illness. I don't know if somebody said on air he had like boo-boo issues or something like that. I don't know. But I don't fault him for that. Without these whatever it was, the back illness or the stomach issues, that chunk that he was playing like 5 or 6 games, he was like 20 points plus, averaging a 6-man. I think the issue was he was starting at the beginning of the season a lot. And since Derek White left, he's been that 6-man. I think 6-man is exactly where he belongs, and he can thrive in that 6-man role. So Lonnie Walker, you like him, you believe in him. I always have too. It was really tough for me to cut for him though this season because of his inconsistency. But I think the issue is that he needs to be 6-man, and he's doing a great job. So we can now back it up because he's been pulling in numbers with the exception of his little stomach issues and stuff like that. So Lonnie Walker is another person. Devin Vassell is somebody else that I like too. He's somebody else that with the absence of Derek White, we were trying to figure out who he's going to be stacked with, who's going to take Derek White's role, because they seem to stagger Dejounte Murray for a couple. They both start together, Dejounte and Derek, and then they stagger throughout the game. Dejounte for a couple minutes, Derek, Dejounte, Derek. So we were trying to figure out who's going to be that guy. Well, it's Devin Vassell and Josh Primo also as well. So those two guys are people that I think are going to be taking that spot. Josh Primo has already shown leadership skills in the game, so I think he has potential, and he's young as hell. He has potential to have leadership qualities. He reminds me of somebody who's super aggressive, who's a good player. He has his inconsistencies because he's young. He's made his mistakes in the fourth quarter a couple of times, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I think the players that stand out to me the most, Josh Primo, Devin Vassell, Lonnie Walker as 6-man, Jakob Poeltl is very underrated to me, and then of course Dejounte Murray. Keldon Johnson, he's trying to find his way out and just be more consistent, but when he's on from the 3-point line, he can shoot from every part of the arc. So that's what I really like about him.
Okay, let's focus in strictly on Dejounte. Let's focus in on a guy that is the 11th ranked most efficient player in the NBA currently. And yet, in typical Spurs fashion, he is not getting talked about by a single person in the mainstream media. Dejounte, top 15 in terms of efficiency, but what's separating him from being a top 15, top 20 NBA player?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I'm stumped with that one. I don't know what it is, but I think it could be possibly that San Antonio is a small market. And another thing that I'm thinking of at the top of my head, it might be the record. Like everybody was saying, he can't be an all-star because they don't have the record to back it up. Dejounte Murray is not scoring like 52 points like John Morant did the other day on Dejounte Murray. And this is a whole nother subject, but I think John Morant was taking shots at Dejounte Murray. Everybody tells me he wasn't, but I think he was. And that's why Dejounte Murray was so mad when he played against John Morant and he dropped 52 on him, because I felt like they was in a little crazy ass competition, but that's neither here nor there. I feel like that's a great topic. But Dejounte Murray, I think is because, number one, he's not putting up big, crazy ass numbers like John Morant. He's in a small market, and because they don't have the record to back it up. That's the easiest thing I could think about.
All right. Last question I've got for you, as Popovich is going to break the record. The Spurs are headed towards a third year of being in what I like to call 10th seed purgatory. So I ask you, how long is Popovich going to hang out in San Antonio before he goes and enjoys his vacation on a beach somewhere for the next 20 years of his long life?
Well, 2 years ago, I said he had 2 years left, so I was wrong. So your guess is as good as mine. We don't know what Pop is going to do. I think with his personal situation that happened with his wife, I think that made him last in the league a little bit longer. He could hang it up once he beats his coaching record, but it seems like he still really loves coaching. So he might have one more year left in him. I have no clue. I don't know who his predecessor is going to be, but my guess is maybe the end of this year or next year. But I have absolutely no clue. I had asked Derek White when I had interviewed Derek White. He came onto my show. I asked him when I had asked him about Becky Hammon, because I'm a girl. I'm going to talk about Becky. You know what I'm saying? So I asked him about Becky. I said, is she going to be would you want her to coach you as a Spurs? And he was like, well, Pop got to retire first. And I was like, well, when is Pop going to retire? Because, I'm going to ask that on the cool. And he was like, I don't know, when he ready. So even Derek White didn't know when he was going to retire. So nobody knows.
Well, speaking on Derek White, as a Celtics fan, thank you for him. Thank you. We definitely appreciate him so far with his short Celtics tenure. Carolina, thank you for coming on, though. That most importantly, thank you for coming on. We're trying to talk about all the teams in the NBA, and certainly the Spurs. You mentioned it, small market, kind of underrepresented. So it's good to know that there's quality content creators talking San Antonio Spurs, talking the silver and the black. Go ahead and give the shameless tags one more time.
Okay, guys, if you guys really love Spurs talk or you guys love just watching me do my thing, you can follow me on Twitter, on Instagram at Carolina Teague _ and you can listen to me on San Antonio SportsStar 103.3 FM, 94.5 AM. Wait, no, that's not it. 103.3 FM, 1250 AM. There we go. We just changed stations. That's our thing. So thank you guys so much. Give me a follow, and thank y'all so much for having me on. It was my pleasure.
Absolutely. Go check her out. Slumpbusters, you know I do. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and comment below what you think of the San Antonio Spurs season. From Juju Talk Sports, Kyle Ledbetter. We will see you next time.